Hey, this is Wes at Anti-Fragile Physical Therapy, and today I'm super excited to have Katie Aman with us, someone who truly embodies the spirit of grit and curiosity and love for cycling and sport. She grew up a swimmer in New Hampshire, found her way on two wheels while she was at Middlebury College, joining the cycling club on a whim after her freshman year. She says, thanks to mom for that one. And that sparked what's become really a lifelong passion for cycling in all its forms. From road racing, cyclocross, mountain biking, dove in headfirst and became the president of Middlebury Cycling. Then moving on academically in 2019, doing research in public health at UNC Chapel Hill, all while racing semi-professionally. She's competed in Belgium, the Netherlands, Canada, all across the US, and in 2023 won the Collegiate Criterium National Club for UNC while serving as their co-president. Today, she is with the United Cycling Women's Elite team, and she also helps manage. And when she's not on the bike, she is an epidemiologist with Mayheck Mountain Area Health Education Center in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and lives with her partner, Coley, who we've had the opportunity to meet and is also a cycling world person himself. So I'm sure your house is full of all sorts of baubles and probably has bikes that are as expensive as your cars, if it's anything like mine. So welcome, Katie. And we're just so excited to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Wes. I'm really excited to be here.
Cool. So, from that standpoint, you talked about having really the love of like all sorts of different cycling styles. Is there one of those, criterium, time trial, mountain biking, cyclocross? Is there one that really you just sort of feel like you were kind of designed to do, like where you're like, I love this bike more than all the rest of them?
Yeah, I would say that's the time trial bike for me. I got a time trial bike during the pandemic and did not really put it together for a year or more. I was like, this seems like a project that I don't want to deal with right now. And I eventually put it together. And in 2023, I started riding it. So it did take me a while to put it together. But once I did, I absolutely loved it, and I definitely get teased a lot by my teammates for how much I ride my time trial bike, which is potentially more than my road bike.
Wow. Any sense of why you love that time trial bike? And I have to say, living here in Western North Carolina, we have narrow shoulders. We've got small stopping spaces, blind corners all over the place. Riding consistently on a time trial bike is not usually how people do their big base mileage. So why do you think it is that you love that bike so much?
Well, one of the things that I really love about that bike is that I built it up from the frame pretty much with my mechanic back in Chapel Hill when I was a student at UNC. And so it's like my second time trial bike, but I really like customized pretty much everything about it. And I also think that time trialing just sort of suits my physiology. And so it has worked out really well, coupled with the fact that I'm very into the aerodynamics and the equipment aspect of it. I think that's just really brought me a lot of joy. And I'm also a little bit of a daredevil. So I absolutely love the speed of the time trial bike and definitely enjoy cornering, even on some of the mountain roads on my time trial bike. And in Hendersonville, we have some more flat to rolling terrain. So it actually works out for me to ride the time trial bike a lot during the week.
Okay. That is, yeah. Not everyone's experience as you're around here. You say physiologically, it feels like it's like your place to go. Is that, again, looking at like VO2 metrics? Is it looking at physiological testing metrics, or is it that you just really like to suffer and can stay sort of at that red line pain cave entrance and that for longer periods?
Yeah, I would say some of it is that I'm pretty good at holding threshold for a long time. And so that can really help on the time trial bike. I'd say my handling skills are pretty good. My aerodynamics are fine, I think, for where I'm at. And also, I have the ability to sort of do on certain time trial courses like an over under effort. So I recover pretty well when I have to go really hard, as long as I have some recovery. So I think the pacing aspect of that really suits me, combined with just suffering by myself. I kind of prefer it because I feel like there's more controllables for me in that situation. I'm not depending on anybody else around me. It's just my own effort. So I do really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point compared to the other disciplines that you're talking about, where it really is like you and it might be a small crowd, but it's a crowd. like it's you're just racing who's out there on that day, and kind of going back and forth with whatever that racing element's going to be, rather than just purely you and the wind and the elements and your bike. That's. Are there any particular aspects like you were like, hey, I've got all these things that make time trialing great, but like my aerodynamics are okay? Like, what are there some considerations you've had to take personally, like with your cycling setup, versus what might be sort of optimal if you were in a wind tunnel or other places for aerodynamics?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, Wes, because time trialing is a bit of a combination of power, aerodynamics, and comfort on the bike. And so, if you don't really dial in your position, you can lose a lot of power and you might be super aerodynamic. But if you can't really maximize your power, you actually might be hamstringing yourself. And so, one thing I've had to play around with is I know I love to push from my quads like a lot, like very, very quad dominant. And that is good on the time trial bike, but you don't want to be like absolutely destroying your quads in a stage race if you have multiple days of racing. So there's some balance you have to do in terms of like position where you're also maximizing your power. I've been really lucky on the TT bike. I have very similar power numbers to my road bike, which is fairly uncommon, I think. But some of that is training the position. But there's also this thing that I know to be true, which is that you cannot really train a fit to work for you. Like it's not going to suddenly become better because you've been on that fit for 5 months instead of 5 weeks. So there's some initial upfront work where you have to be comfortable in the position just naturally at the beginning because it's not going to suddenly get better just by riding it more. And so I think that's definitely a consideration. And I'm also very short. And so for me, looking at people like, for example, Filippo Ganna, it's not going to really help me understand what position I need to be in. That guy is like amazing, but he's a foot taller than me. So the proportion, the body proportion is very different. And like personally, I'm a huge fan of Remco Evenepoel and everyone wants to copy his time trial fit, but he has absolutely insane mobility. He has like really specific proportions that make that fit work for him to get really, really aerodynamic. So I think another thing I've learned is that it's nice to look at the pros and see what they're doing, but copying them is probably not going to be your key to success because everyone's bodies are really different. So you have to take those things into account when you're doing like a fit for a time trial bike or even a road bike.
No, that is such a great point. We run into that all the time, especially in the world of cycling that is so gear oriented, and people really dig into kind of what people are doing. But like you're absolutely right. Like talking to, I had a conversation with Brent Bookwalter, who is a U.S. Olympian time trialist, and just his overall flexibility was just out of this world to just like sit in that position. He looks super comfortable in ways that other people are not. And that combination of like aerodynamics is only as good as you're moving fast. So if you suddenly are sitting up a little bit out of it because you're uncomfortable or because your power production starts to go down and you're fatiguing, you're trying to push, then you sit up and you're just a giant sail. So it's not super productive anyway. And convince people that have gone to the wind tunnel or that have gone to places that their fit is not serving them as well as it ought to after they spend a lot of money on perfectly great bike fits because they're not comfortable or they're not capable is a hard conversation to have on the physical therapy side of things. So like, no, thank you. That's a wonderful tip. And looking to pros for information is a great place to see what the best in the world do, but also they're complete outliers in so many ways. So that's great. And again, like bicycles are like quad power transfer machines. Like that's why they're such like a wonderful machine. And so, yeah, like you go into like the track particularly, and it is how low can you get and how much can you push with your quads for an hour. Again, there's no stage race though. You're not coming back tomorrow to then climb up a mountain or to try and get out in a breakaway or even just stay with the group. That's again such great advice, particularly talking about setup and feeling connected. Being like you said, you talked in reference a few like male time trialists who you think are some of the tops in the world, and what can I do? As a female athlete, particularly like you said, you're short. Sometimes the frames and the accessories that we really deal with around bikes, it still is a pretty male dominant sport. There's some cool things with custom printed saddles and some other new shoe companies that are coming out and just trying to create like a bigger, broader swath. I mean, every female mountain bike still comes with an 800 mil sweep bar, even on a small, which I still can't figure that one out. But are there specific things that you and or your team are looking at as to deal with female athletes versus their male counterparts in the world of cycling?
Yeah, great questions. Like one thing specifically on the time trial bike is that I've gone down to 155 cranks. And so I used to run 165s, and then I did some aero testing out in LA with a guy named Jim Manton, and he's done a lot of aero testing. And his belief is also that aero testing outside can be really beneficial instead of being more static in the wind tunnel, where you might go outside after the wind tunnel and realize that you cannot actually hold that position at all. So I tested with him outdoors, which is really useful because you're really like in your position that you would be doing. And he was looking at my position and he was like, I think, you could benefit from shorter cranks because it will open up your hip angle. And I think because the standard from Shimano and SRAM has been to make basically 165s, a lot of women have maybe gotten the short end of that because I think they would benefit from running a shorter crank. And everybody's different, obviously, but just women in general are shorter. So I think shorter cranks can really help or be an option. And it's tough when like the manufacturers don't go down lower. But I think now with everybody seeing that the like Jonas Vingegaard is also running 155s and they're like, oh my God, we should all switch to that, which I think is also very reactive. But it's nice because it now means that there's more interest in running shorter cranks. And then also for saddles, like with our women's team, everyone runs a very, very different saddle. And I think that's totally normal and okay. I've, heard of stories of people where they've just had to like throw their saddle in the trash because it was so bad, from whatever like sponsor. And so I think not having a sponsor saddle can really be beneficial because everyone's, especially for female athletes, very different with soft tissue. And I actually run a different saddle on my TT bike versus my road bike because the positions are very different. So the ISM saddle works really well for me on the time trial bike, but I'm very rolled forward. And so that's to me is not going to work on the road bike. And then with shoes, I also find people are very different. So everyone on the team tends to run a different brand of shoes. I have really wide feet at the toe box. And so, for example, like I've tried the Specialized shoes and they don't work for me because my feet swell up so badly. It's like rubbing. And so I always have used the Louis Garneau shoes. It's just because they have a wider toe box and I really like that. And obviously there's people with narrower feet, but I also run orthotics, custom orthotics in my cycling shoes. And so that shoe has to be able to accommodate that. And for me, it's like a certain thing. And for other people, it's going to be different. And so, yeah, I think the shoe range is important to consider when you're looking at like a women's team, like, or even a men's team. Like people are just going to need different footwear.
I totally agree. And for the orthotic piece, was that something that was done to try to optimize biomechanics, or was it something that was in response to trying to deal with a comfort issue?
Yeah, so I've always had extremely pronated feet and collapsed arches. And so I've always had orthotics in my just normal walking and like running shoes. And so my physical therapist made me a full, like back from maybe 5, 10 years ago when I lived in New Hampshire, she made me like full orthotics for the cycling shoe. And I actually really like that and prefer that. And I know fitters will make custom orthotics too, but I feel like it's great to get it from a physical therapist because she really knew my like biomechanics and what I would need for like shoe support while I was riding.
Yeah, and that's such a swimmer story, is that you just end up with paddles for feet
Yes.
that just don't work very well on land. And I can tell you all sorts of stories. My collegiate roommate was a butterfly
Yes.
swimmer.
Yes, I was too. I was a great butterflyer, and it's because I have crazy ankle flexion. Like I can point my toe and it will basically touch the floor. So I have incredible ankle flexion, which just means, yeah, like I have no support in my foot because it's a great paddle, but when it comes to like support, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, and when you have a flexible, the more rigid the foot lever, like from a biomechanics standpoint, what we have figured out again with the shorter cranks, when I started, this is early 2000s, 170 cranks were hard to come by. Everything I had coworkers, a guy who rode for Team Jamis in the late 90s that rode a 185 crank single speed 29er. for his mountain bike. And he was just like, boy, my knees are sore after these really long all day rides. And you're like, no kidding. Um,
Right,
and
right.
as I started to get in the fitting world, and I was like, it's weird that all these track bikes have 165 cranks for everybody when you're trying to do like the fastest, hardest thing, most efficient in the world. I was like, this is interesting. And I actually shortened up my own cranks and like upped my turnover rate to like 170. And I did a lot of endurance mountain biking and avoided like no overuse injuries, no aches and pains. The foot discomfort that I kind of would get with the 175 just kind of went away because you're not pushing quite so hard. You can spin a better circle. So to me, that's been like, as again, as handlebars have gotten wider and cranks have gotten shorter, I feel like, we're just trading. But from a musculoskeletal standpoint, that has been one of the biggest things is just the availability of 2.5 millimeter differences of like standard crank sizes, helping people just again with those aches and pains, knees particularly. But again, looking at that sense of like, what are we doing with shoes? And again, the adaptability, the stiffness of shoes has improved over times. Where you can put that and pedal spindle, you can again just decrease that lever arm to again make you a better quad power transfer machine as a cyclist. So that's great that you've experienced that same thing. And go back to your saddle part. So you again different saddles, brand wise, but you tend to have several different standard saddle shapes that you tend to see. Is it still the same shape that you tend to like your saddle with on your time trial versus your road bike? Or do you have like a different flare? Do you have like sort of the where it just sort of drapes over the side and you don't have anything sort of abutting like your sit bones? Or is it wildly different or something similar?
I would say it's fairly different because my TT saddle is the ISM is pretty long and narrow nosed, and I run the specialized power with Mimic and it's a women specific saddle on the
Mhm.
road bike. And so I would say that those saddles are fairly different. But I also on the road bike do struggle with saddle comfort sometimes, but I do think that comes down more to chamois sometimes, like the chamois quality. And so I've realized that I had a lot of people over time just being like, "Oh, it's saddles. It's always the saddle." But I've realized that it's also the interaction with what you're wearing because you can get chafing, or if the chamois is a certain shape, you'll realize that it doesn't like interface well with the saddle that you're riding because maybe it's way too short or too long, and so it's specifically rubbing at the edge of the saddle. And so it's like both of those things you kind of have to consider. And because I sit so much more upright on the road bike, it's just different because on the TT bike, like when you're really pushing power, you will slide forward on the nose and you want that to be comfortable, which is why that saddle that I run has a longer nose. So when I'm really pushing and I'm sliding forward, I can still sit there and that's like normal. But I wouldn't want to be doing that on the road bike because that's not very comfortable when you're like climbing up a mountain and you want to put pressure back a little bit more.
No, and again, like totally makes sense. And as someone who's done fitting for a lot of years with women in particular, the type of conversations about comfort and soft tissue comfort and sort of issues that are around how you interface, pelvic area interfaces with bike saddles. It used to just be such a tough conversation because again, everything was set for men's hip widths, everything was set for men's sit bones. Again, they started building out channels, but the channels were definitely built for male comfort, not for female
Yeah.
comfort. And so again, it is great to see the sort of expansive of the accessories that you can kind of go to. And from a personal standpoint, the last hand issue that I had when I got a new gravel bike, my hands were going numb after a while, and I was like, oh, I changed out the tape, put a gel pad, da da da. I got a new chamois that was like definitely a step up from kind of what I was using, and all my hand numbness went away because I realized that I was shoving myself back a bit with my hands to just keep off of the soft tissue. And I went for a like 4.5 hour bike ride and was like, oh, not a problem at all after like 45 minutes was what I had previously. Many people don't realize how much incentive there is in our nervous system to make our saddle area comfortable at any cost.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And it was funny because a lot of us on the United team this past year were struggling with our chamois. And I think it was good that we were all starting to talk about it and be like, wait, do you guys have this chafing issue? Or is this just me? Because it's really crazy. And then everyone was having the same contact issue. So that's where you're like, okay. And I dug, deeper into some of this, which is like, there's one or two companies that very specifically kind of have worked for me, and a lot of others haven't. And so I went and I dug down, and what I realized is that I think the one company or two that work for me, they make their own sort of custom chamois. And there's this thing called the elastic interface model, which is very popular, but a lot of companies will just buy those like two to three models that are the same and then sew it in. Whereas the companies for me that have worked tend to be the custom ones where they're making a very like specific design choice. And so I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that. I thought I was like crazy. I was like, well, why does this one work when this one's terrible? And it turns out it's all about like, the width and the materials they use.
Absolutely. Again, in previous conversations with pros, many of them would just rip out their uniform whatever chamois was in there and sew in whatever lining that they loved. Again, particularly like the Grand Tour and stage race folks, because it's just you can't do that day after day after day, and tolerate those types of issues. And thinking about that on the long side of things, you were telling me a little bit more when we're talking about like how your team, specifically because you're a women's team and you want to give everybody the ability to have a saddle, you want to have everyone the ability to choose their shoes and their interface, whatever they need, which is great for men's teams too. But you also guys have some other initiatives that you're working on to try to, what would I say, like improve the health of your athletes, maybe is a better way to say it, and women cyclists out there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. And it's still in the works, but we're going to be working with some nutritionists, some mental health folks, some folks in epidemiology who have a focus on women's health. And we're going to try to create the Women's Health Initiative on our team, which is going to be monitoring low energy availability and red S, because I don't think there are necessarily great markers or great ways to track. And so we're just going to try and find ways to keep our athletes healthy, whether that's like mental, physical, or nutrition, and also give women the tools and the knowledge they need, because a lot of that is just not, there's just not education for people. They don't know better. Like, I want to say, 6 years ago, I barely ate on the bike at all. And I still, had good results, but I was like hemorrhaging weight. I was losing so much. And I thought it was like this great thing. And then I realized, like, oh, maybe it's not great that I ate like one like Cliff Bar for this 5 hour ride. And so I want to give like women on my team access to those resources to understand, this is what it looks like. And also just to collect more data on elite female athletes, because there's not a lot out there right now.
And two parts. Would you tell the average listener, who is not nearly as smart as someone with an epidemiological master's degree, a little bit about Red S and maybe why it's particularly interesting in female athletes? So in sort of ultra endurance and aerobic athletics, it's a thing that's around. And two, what types of things are you going to be, one, looking to measure, and two, how are you going to be getting that information out so people can look for that as they go down the road?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So, red S, relative energy deficiency in sport, it can be a problem for both men and women. But in women, it used to be called the female athlete triad too. So it's kind of known by that. And a lot of it, there's different things, but like losing your menstrual period is one marker. Another is just very low energy availability, brain fog, fatigue, things like that. And so it can be very detrimental to performance and just overall, like it can totally degrade your bone health and bone density, and it can just tank your hormone levels and be like absolutely just really bad for your overall health long term. Like, it can have really long term effects. And we're trying to, like, we know this is rampant, especially in cycling that is so focused on power to weight. And I would say running has this problem as well. Like eating disorders go along with this issue that's really rampant. And in the past, it was actually really like people celebrated female athletes losing their menstrual period, which I think is awful. It's not good. That's not a good thing at all. And so now we're trying to bring a focus back on, like, hey, these are ways of being healthy and just looking out for your overall health, whether that includes like mental or also like physical, or like what you even eat off the bike, or hydration. I think a lot of people are dehydrated these days. It's so easy to forget to, just get in hydration. And so we want to track those things. And I think we still have discussions to have with our PhD and our performance manager about how we'll be tracking those. likely through training peaks through athlete data, and looking at weight, and hopefully maybe we can incorporate DEXA scans in somehow. And so I think that would be great to like understand bone density. And so I think there's still going to be conversations around exactly how we track, what metrics we track, but hopefully we can have data, and then we're going to keep being public about calling out like this women's health initiative and what we're doing. And hopefully down the line we can publish some best practices or things that we learned in our data. But for now, we just want to keep it like in-house to understand like what's going to work, what isn't. We're going to try to do some monthly questionnaires and just trial it and see, hey, like what works, what doesn't, and what can we revise to make this more supportive of our female athletes.
That is awesome. And again, like the changes just over the 20 something years I've been in the sports medicine world, again, like understanding the female triad, but also again, like particularly as I've been supporting cyclists for a long time, the changes that happen over that, essential period where you're probably 15, 16, 17 when you really start hitting basically like you stop weight bearing for exercise for sometimes up to a couple decades. And just seeing, I mean, I've seen the DEXA scans, I've seen the x-rays where they talk about, moth-eaten bone and things that basically indicate that your trabecular bone structure has basically dissolved underneath you. And it's hard to build bone density on that back end, or like
Totally.
tendon changes, weight bearing structures just don't work anymore. And you end up at 35 or 40 really struggling to use this huge engine that you've built, right? Like this capacity that you have for exercise and movement, and just bouncing back and forth as trying to maintain health over the like length of life. And then we could talk about, some of the drugs and EPOs and all the other things that people were trying to do
Yeah.
historically, which they're doing less. And now you can just put a, 3D printed engine in the middle of your cycling, that's good enough, and it's made of plastic so the x-rays don't see it. But which, cheating just gets better or different and changes over time. But seeing those challenges for just cyclists, particularly the long-term cyclists, living a good healthy life, and in a life of competition, I think is so much more important than just can we burn through a person to compete or be part of a team or to be part of this particular moment in time. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we will absolutely try and spread the word as best we can. For you, looking at those and just your clear understanding and knowledge as an epidemiologist, and caring about yourself and athletes like you, what does your cross training routine look like
Yeah.
when you're off the bike to
Great
take care of some of
question.
those things that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, Wes. And I have thought a lot about this because in swimming, there's a lot of data coming out now that says that kids who only swim for their primary sport are actually have worse bone density and like, issues around that than kids who just don't do any activity or any exercise really. And as a swimmer, this was like a big wake up call for me. But thankfully, when I swam, we did a lot of dry land and we actually did a lot of weight training. And my coach in high school, he was a CrossFit coach, which I'm not like a huge fan of CrossFit specifically, but he was really good at like teaching lifting, like the lifting principles that you get that you need. He taught me really well how to deadlift. Like when I was 16 or 17, I was deadlifting like 220 pounds or something for my one rep max. And I'm not even close to that now. And so I learned really well how to lift. And my mom also was like a big influence to me because in her 50s, she had pretty bad bone density. She was a runner, but then did a lot of swimming. And so she was like, let me see if I can improve my bone density. And the doctors in Boston were shocked because she literally improved her bone density a lot by lifting. And so she got into powerlifting, which she's like competed in. And then she spent 2 or more years learning how to Olympic lift, which really inspired me to continue to like work with some of her friends who were like phenomenal strength coaches to just support me with both like my swimming and then when I transitioned into cycling. And then my partner, Coley, who coaches me, he's actually doing a lot of bodybuilding right now. So he knows a lot about strength. He coaches all of his athletes in cycling to also do strength in their off season, even sometimes during the season if they're doing track, because that's very beneficial. So my off season looks like doing some amount of riding, but really focusing on the gym 2 times a week, like doing some decently heavy stuff, not like maxing out or anything, but like still putting pretty good weight on the bar. And, I do Romanian deadlifts and single leg squats, single leg Romanian deadlifts, bilateral squats. I love bench pressing because I come from swimming. So I just still like to maintain the upper body. But I've realized as I've been in cycling for almost a decade that I need to, continue to maintain like upper body strength. Like I broke my collarbone. I have like some imbalances in my upper body. So I really actually try to do like rows and presses as well. And some other upper body stuff to just maintain that overall strength. And I just really that and one of my injuries that's plagued me for like 2 years, which is why I came to you and Jeff, was my left lateral knee. And I'm realizing that when I do my strength training, like with especially my Romanian deadlifts, that injury is very like I barely even notice it. Like I don't even feel the knee at all on the bike. And so I think this is a true testament to what strength training can do, and making sure you load your bones, especially if you're in a less weight bearing sport like cycling or swimming.
And like the tendons and connective tissue as well, with like high repetition activity, quad tendons get big, hip flexor tendons get strong, tight, but balancing that out with the hamstring tendons, adductor tendons, Achilles, like there's all these secondary things that just sort of like try to hold on for dear life while your quads just do all the work. But if they can't hold on for dear life, it creates problems, and it creates those overuse injuries, those tweaky things. Tissue thickens, it alters over time. No, I think that's so great, because we run into cyclists so much that either don't do lower body exercises because they say, well, I bike, I get all the lower body exercise I need, or they're worried that they're going to get big when they work on their upper body. And this is, away from mountain bikers and some other
Yeah.
stuff. And then I've got the downhill mountain bike guys. I've got several, guys on the national US circuit at all different age levels who basically just work out like CrossFit athletes
Yeah.
all week.
Yes.
They're strong and they are
Yep.
fit and they are doing threshold stuff. I mean, they're still going out on the bike and doing 2 and 3 hour rides. They're still doing threshold work. They're still doing intervals, but these guys are strong and they hit the ground and they get back up real quick. And I've had people that have like had small falls in a parking lot waiting for their buddies and just shattered their humerus or broken their collarbone,
Totally.
because they just don't have the density of the tissue and the muscle to be able to absorb just even those small hits. And that is, again, that from a longevity standpoint, from a
Yeah.
your body is thriving standpoint, I think that those are things that sometimes get pushed to the side or aren't thought of well. And people get some weird ideas about what it means to be healthy.
Totally. And I agree. Like, I think the downhillers and also track in some ways really have some good perspective on this. Like, like you were saying with track, and I know this to be true, those guys were running shorter cranks before anybody on the road. They were running narrower handlebars, which I like to do. A lot of women like to do because we don't have wide wingspans. They also love to lift. That's another way, you get really strong. And so I think there's some good stuff to take away from other disciplines if you're coming, looking at road specifically. It's like you don't want to like tip over on your bike and crack a bone because you couldn't take the fall. And so, yeah, I think people are, like you said, like I even coach some athletes and they're like, oh, I'm worried about, getting super big. I'm like, you would have to be doing like real hypertrophy. And let me tell you, you're not even close. Like you can push a lot of my female athletes specifically. I'm like, you can push way harder than that. And I know because I've been you in the gym. Like I thought, oh, I could only, squat 80 pounds. And then suddenly you change your mindset of like, no, let me really push, like, let me unlock something there. And you're adding like, and I've seen this with like my female athletes, they're adding like 40 pounds one week because they're like, let me like really try and push. And they're like, wait a minute, I could do way more than I thought. And I'm like, yeah, see, I told you you're not going to like become like the Hulk in 3 weeks.
The information, well, I'll just call it information rather than mis or disinformation, that's out there about so many aspects of health and fitness and what it means to balance out your body and to exercise well and to move well. It's just wild. And the research always just shows, like, I remember the first study that said just like 3 times a week, just do 1 set of as heavy a squat as you can for like 6 to 8 reps. And the performance improvements in cyclists it was like double-digit percentage point improvements from just like 6 weeks of just like doing a heavy lift, not even a comprehensive program, just like adding that in.
Yeah, they're smart. Like the folks studying strength training, I will say, like with training, me and Coley have chatted about the literature and like the coaching. He's like, if you think cycling's like pretty good with their data, like you have not read the strength literature. Those guys are like way ahead in training. Like they understand training, they understand progressive overload, they understand rest. And so I would just say, like, you know, people might not even realize that if they're like coming from endurance sports, that there's so much that's been done in the strength training literature to understand, like, how does this affect people, what's the most effective way to train, and they're like way ahead of us on metrics.
Yeah, and again, like the going through the world of my time in different sports, moving from the '90s into the 2000s, overworking like in endurance sports was just the hallmark, and it really wasn't like, are you the best swimmer, are you the best cyclist? It's, can you tolerate the
Mhm.
huge amount of volume that you're going through, and that fortunately is starting to at least change. But like when you love endurance sports, it's just fun to do more of it to some
Yes.
degree, or you're addicted to it and you need,
Mhm.
if you don't get 5 hours of cycling in a day, the
Yeah.
hamster won't get off the wheel. Or you're goal oriented and you're just like, oh, I saw so and so did this. So it's like more must be better. And again, the ability to integrate rest, like you said, in the bodybuilding, the powerlifting world, like that's been just known for a long time. Like if you want to build the most muscle, you warm up really well, you lift as much as you can twice, and you go eat a steak and take a nap. Like that is a great way to get better. And in cycling and in other things, the high intensity, short activation levels with a good warm up that are progressive, and then getting rest in, because rest is where you get the gains. Like it's work plus recovery equals training, right? So it's great to hear. Okay, we're about to run into our time. This has been just great, such a fun conversation. But what I'm asking everyone we're chatting with is, what is the most uncomfortable you can remember being on a bike?
Oh my gosh, I think I have like recency bias because one of time was recently when I got my new road bike, my new Factor. We thought, like, me and my mechanic thought we had matched it to my old road bike, but the problem is that everything was like integrated, so that really changes, like, the measurement they say for like a stem or a bar length is like different, and I need like short reach bars, and I didn't really remember that my bars were short reach, and I was having this just awful day with a bunch of friends on the bike. I mean, they were great. The bike fit was not. And I was just in so much agony in my back. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? So I brought it to like one of my fitters around here and I was like, can you like tell me what's going on? Like versus my old road bike, like, cause that fit is good. And he was like, oh, that's like 3 centimeters, like too long of reach. And so that was super painful. And my old time trial bike was also kind of painful. Like I'm pretty, I think I'm hypermobile in my back, so I have good like mobility. And so I was able to contort myself in all these like positions on that bike, but it was very uncomfortable. And so when I got my new bike, and like I specifically put the watch shop front end on it, which is very, very comfortable, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, I want to ride this bike for more than 1 hour, unlike the other one where I was like, the elbow pads were just so like scratchy, and like the whole thing was just, I'm like contorting myself with my shoulders. It was like the worst feeling. And so I think you don't know until you're then in the better position. You're like, this is night and day, this is crazy.
And it's surprising because it's sometimes, I mean, 3 centimeters is hilarious based on how tall you are, and that change in reach. That's awful. But sometimes just the millimeters of change that you can make, and people are like, I
Yeah.
didn't know I could be better. And sometimes people are just so far off that you completely put them in a new position. They're like, this is
Yeah.
never going to work. There's just no way. But like you change the physics enough that they're like, and you can immediately just like hear, or you can see it on the power meters, that it's like you just like send them through the roof. And I'm like, well, you'll use a lot less energy sitting on the bike and a lot more like pedaling it forward. And you'll probably be a lot happier with that from a fatigue standpoint.
Oh yeah,
Awesome.
totally. And like you never know too, like you might need to make little tweaks or something. Like one fitter wanted me to go up a little bit and see if that worked for me, but he was like, it might not, but like try it. And I did it for a few months. I gave it a real try and I didn't like it. So I went back down to where I was, where my old fitter in New England put me. And so I was like, you know what? That's like fine. That's just, sometimes that's how it is. You try something out and it's like that actually doesn't really feel better to me. And so you just mark things, and if you have to, you just move it back, which I used to be really scared about. I was like, I won't touch this at all. I won't do anything to it. And now I'm a little more like, okay, I'll try it, but just make sure you mark everything. And then if you need to move it back, that's okay.
Yeah, everything's a range. And like as the season goes on, people get conditioned to a certain position. They might get, you focus on flexibility. You can add some core strength in. Like there's things that can absolutely allow your body to sit differently on the bike. And being able to adjust in those is so important for people. Usually, a lot of people will either get it first thing in the season or when they get a new bike or when they're in pain, which are all great times to get a bike fit. But sometimes there's an evolution because once you get out of those pain, once you like get comfortable with your bike fit and used to it, well, then sometimes there's adjustments that you have to make kind of midstream, and kind of knowing what those are super important. We always try and talk about that. When people are in here getting stuff tweaked and tinkered with, that there can be change, and change is fine. This is not a static thing. This is a dynamic thing, just like your body, and how you're training it makes a big difference. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today. This was super fun.
Absolutely.
And for sharing all the stories. And I love what you guys are doing with like the Red S stuff. Is that something that's through like just the team currently, and you're going to keep indoors? Or are you doing this as part like with Mayhec and getting some people on board there from an epidemiological standpoint? Like I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
So right now it's sort of in-house because Coley will be doing it as a performance instructor.
Okay.
But my former boss at Mayhec, she moved to Roanoke. She works as an epidemiologist for HCA up there. She's gonna help him implement this because she has like a PhD in epidemiology, and specifically for her like dissertation at University of Michigan was on female athlete like health. And so I think in runners. And so she's gonna really help us with coming up with the metrics and things like that. And then we're also pulling in a nutritionist she's also a PhD in nutrition. And so I think that'll be a really cool way to just start, from the ground up and then build from there. And like my sports psychologist, I want her to get involved as well because she has familiarity with the topic. And I just think it's like great to have like all facets of that.
Totally. And it's so much, it's just like talking about like comfort on a bike. And I was talking with Nick Bragg, who's like a king of Pisgah mountain biking
Yeah.
champion. And what we ended up talking about was some injuries he had, and how it just feels a little hard to go as fast and be able to do that, and having to work through the mental aspect of, the yips is kind of what they call it in the collective sport, but where you're just like, I don't feel like I can let it go. I don't feel like I can, do the thing I want to do. And that's, comfort is a thing. And people are tense, people are scared, people are worried, people are whatever. So I love the component of mindfulness or self-awareness, and how those things affect, choices both on and off the bike. So wonderful. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm just so excited. Like so many things in cycling are not driven by like data or empirical like kind of findings. It's just like, hey guys, let's just like work harder, like, have like 5 grams of carbs an hour, which thankfully has really changed. But it's like, yeah, I don't really think that's makes any sense. Like if you think about it for 2 seconds, it just does not make sense. And there's got to be some more empirical stuff instead of like, okay, guys, I feel like you just mentally gave up. Like, no, I think the physiology is more your limiter here.
you just gave up.
Yeah.
That happens so much in pro sports with highly competitive people that are very goal
Right,
oriented.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they just gave up if they just, like, mentally, like, focused in more. It's like, "No, actually, I think you're bumping up against, like, physical limitation too."
Yeah, and finding the balance, and again, just starting with curiosity, and what can be measured, and therefore what can be understood, are just such big parts of it. Awesome. Well, Katie, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time again.
no problem.
I'll let you know when we have this chopped up. And
Perfect.
thank you again for your time, and
Of
hopefully, and good
course.
luck with, it's a little quiet right now, but
Yeah,
with the off season, and let
thank
us
you.
know, where to find us if you need anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably be in soon for tune-ups.
Beautiful. We'll see you then. Thanks again.
Bye, Wes.
Cheers.